So now that we have our attack collisions working correctly, we need to start being able to cue animations between our characters on screen and start subtracting health from their health stats pool that we made right here in our last video. All right, so what we're going to focus on here is getting Gambit to take damage correctly. So let's just jump into it. So why don't we go ahead and pull up our Gambit controller script right here. And let's make some new variables up here, some new public variables. Let's make a public variable float took damage. And these are going to be flags that help us call our animation states. And public float knocked down. These are going to be our two flags that tell us what state we're in, whether we've taken damage or whether we've been knocked down with that third powerful attack from our enemy that we're going to set up. All right, so conditional logic. Let's go down and move to our is hit places down here. What we're going to do is we're going to have to just totally rework these two things, because before they were just tests with key button impresses. Now we're going to actually add the logic here. And we're also going to use a coroutine for our get hit. So we're going to just jump into that right now. So let's just delete is hit and let's just start from scratch. So let's say if took damage equals true. And let's say we don't want to take damage if we're already knocked down, just to make it fair. And if knocked down equals false. Then we're going to do some code, right? Well, we're going to make a coroutine. So our coroutine, and we're going to call this, I don't know, took damage. And why don't we go down here and just set up a quick coroutine for took damage. So we're going to do an enumerator. This is so we can accurately give our attack animations time to play out and to add a light stun effect to our player whenever he gets hit by our enemy. All right, like so. So now we're going to add the code in our took damage coroutine function. So why don't we say, first let's get our animator to play our hurt animation and can move. Let's set it to false. We don't want to be able to move when we're taking damage. And let's do our yield, return, new, wait for seconds. This is basically this is what's going to add our stun time to our enemy. So stun time. Wait, we don't have a stun time variable. Let's go make one real quick. So I'm going to go to the top. And why don't we say public float stun time. So now we have an actual stun time. Oh, got to make sure that when I'm calling my function, I have the right kind of syntax. Functions begin with capital letters, like so. So we're going to play our hurt animation. We're going to make sure we can't move. And then we're going to wait for how long we want our character to be stunned before we turn can move back to true and took damage is false. So where did that took damage? I mean, we've been using took damage, but we haven't made any code to change the value of took damage. Where are we going to do that? Because right here it says if it's true, we start this coroutine. Then after the end of the coroutine, we turn took damage back to false. Well, with my attack collision script, one of the things we're going to do whenever our player takes damage, right here in our player take damage function, is we're going to say, well, where's our, what we know is we need to turn our took damage variable right here that we made. We need to set took damage to true. And that took damage variable, right now we have some errors because we're not done coding, so ignore those. Right now our took damage variable should be in our inspector. So what are we going to do here? Well, I guess we need to go to our attack collision, and we need to be able to access our Gambit controller script from attack collision. So why don't we go up, and we already have our Gambit controller script player state. So why don't we say player state equals to other object dot get component Gambit controller script, like so. So now we have access through this local variable name player state. Now we can access our Gambit controller script whenever our enemy makes contact. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say player state dot took damage equals true. And this is going to be our global flag in the game that says our player just took damage because the enemy attack box collided with the player hitbox. So the player took damage equals true. So let's go over to our Gambit controller script. Okay, if took damage equals true and we're not knocked down, then we're going to start our took damage coroutine. Is that how you spell took? I think it is. Anyway, so we're going to play our hurt animation. We're not going to be able to move. We're going to lock the player out of being able to move through the amount of stun time that we want to say. And then after our stun's over, we'll be able to move again, and took damage will be turned back to false. So that's the kind of logic flow that will be going on here. So I'm going to press Control S and save this. All right, so we got a little compiler error. So player state equals true. I think I know what I did. Did I do take damage as a float? Yep, I'm dumb. Gotta love making those mistakes. So basically what I did was I typecast my flags, took damage and knocked down as floats. So yeah, it was saying floats can't be true or false because you're an idiot and don't know how to code. So hopefully you caught that and you were mildly irritated that, well, if you did catch it, that means you catch it on. Anyway, so now that I got that error taken care of, a lot of tutorials out there, they just try to be like, here's point A to point B. I like to include mistakes just so you can see a natural programming progression here. At least that's the excuse I'm using. All right, so hopefully, yep, our compiler script's done. And now we can see on my Gambit character, I have some more flags, took damage, knocked down, and then we have stun time right here. And let's set that to like 0.1, something really small for the time being. So now that we have that logic set up, what are we going to do? Well, why don't we go ahead and set up our knockdown logic, and then we'll test. All right, so what are we going to do? How are we going to test whether or not we're getting knocked down here? Well, I don't think we can just say player took damage equals true. I think we have to have some conditional statements within our attack collision. So we're working under our function that controls when our player takes damage. And why don't we make some conditional statements here? So I'm going to do an if, almighty if knockdown attack equals true, then we want to say, let's get rid of that. Then we want to access our player state again, dot knockdown equals true. Else, we're just going to do a simple else here. Else, if our knockdown attack, is false, then we're just going to do a simple player took damage equals true. Before we do any kind of the animation, knockdown, take damage stuff, why don't we adjust our health values here? So how am I going to do that? Well, I guess I have to make another private variable here. Let's do stats dot other stats. This is what we're going to be able to use to get to our health variable on our characters or enemies. So we're just going to do another initialization of this local variable to get at our stat script on Gambit over here. So we'll say other stats equals other game object, other object dot get component dot stats. So now that we can get at our stats component here, we can say that other stats dot health equals other stats dot health minus attack strength. And there we go. That's all we need to do to calculate damage taken away from, or health being taken away from our character that's being attacked here. All right, great. So it looks like our player take damage function is pretty much done. This is all we need right now for the time being to get our player to take damage and be knocked down. So we're going to go back over to, what do we have to do? Go back over to my Gamut controller script. All right, so let me just find out where I'm at. Here's our knockdown and I enumerator. And we're going to say if knocked down equals true, instead of that input, instead of pressing E on the keyboard, we now have a global flag boolean that we set in our attack collision script here. So then we can just start our knockdown coroutine. So there's a few more things we need to do to get our animations to start playing correctly. We need to adjust our animation transitions, I think. Yeah, so we're going to have to go in and adjust those. But I think we need to pay careful attention to our knockdown here. And just to simplify things, I'm going to comment out this physics stuff right here. I don't want that stuff to get in the way. So I'm just going to do a comment out block here. So, / asterisk followed by asterisk / will basically comment out a body of code like so. So originally we were just saying that animator.play fall. We were just calling the fall animation here. But I think what we need to do is we need to actually use some parameters now here. So instead of that, I'm going to just comment that out so we can see how it was in the old way. We're going to call our animator.setBool. And we're going to set bool to, let's see, knocked down, true. So what is that knocked down in quotation marks? Well, that's that parameter in our animator window, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and delete these transitions that we set up before, because we're going to set up a little bit differently. Let me get this any state kind of out of the way. And I'm just going to position our hurt and fall like so. All right. So with these new transitions we're going to set up, you know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the animator.play uncommented out. We are going to just go ahead and call this fall node right here whenever we call our knockdown coroutine. But this time I'm going to add a transition. I'm going to right click on fall, make transition to idle, like so. And on this transition, I'm going to go to give it a condition. So I'm going to click on that little transition arrow. We'll give it a condition of knockdown. And we only want fall to go into idle whenever knockdown is now set to false. We're going to leave it as an exit timer, like so. And why don't we just adjust our transitions perfectly like that. And then what we want to do after we yield wait for new, we already have this animator set bool. We're already set knockdown to true. What we're going to do is we're going to say, instead of animator play idle, we're going to get rid of that. And we're going to go false. So this boolean being set to false will trigger this transition back to idle rather than us just outright playing. Let me undo that so we can see what I'm talking about. This is what I wanted to comment out on actuality. Instead of just calling animator.play idle, we're going to set our knockdown boolean to true. So this transition right here will be triggered and will go smoothly into idle rather than just abruptly going into idle. All right. And what we want to say too is we want to make sure our knockdown variable is now set to false, because after our knockdown time runs out, we actually get up, so we're not knocked down anymore. So we'll set that back to false right there. All right, hit Control S to save. And we've already kind of looked at our transition from fall to idle. So why don't we click on hurt, make a transition to idle. And we're not going to add any conditions here. We're just going to play hurt once. So I like to adjust it like so. We're going to make sure it has an exit time. And we're not going to give it any conditions. It looks like we're good. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and test this and see what happens. So we'll press play. So I go up to my Sentinel. Looks good. Our player's doing the hurt animation. And he's getting knocked down on that third hit. Why don't we check his health out? Oh, we're already sitting in negative numbers on health. We should have been dead a long time ago. And here's a quick little thing I want to show you guys on as far as getting our animations and stun time tweaked even further. If you click on your hurt animation right here, you can actually adjust the speed of how fast that animation plays. And look what happens if I set the speed down, really slow by 0.3. All right. Should have gone slower there. So if I go up to Gambit and maybe adjust the stun time to 0.3, give it a longer stun time and decrease the amount of speed that plays at. Let's see what happens that way. We can see that my animation is playing a little bit slower now, or at least it should be. Well, anyway, you can tweak those values here to adjust the I don't know, amount of stun time and how fast the animation plays according to your stun time. All right, so I think we're set up with our player taking damage now. Our next video is going to be enemy taking damage.